Courtney Lilly, you're the showrunner for Blackish, which ended its run this spring after 8 seasons. You've been with the show for all 8 seasons, but you've only became the showrunner in season 6. What would you say was the biggest challenge, when you went from, your previous writer role into that showrunner position, when that came about?
It's interesting. They have a showrunner training program for the WGA, and there's a whole thing. You never know what you're going to expect. It's like everybody, the Mike Tyson quote, everybody has a plan until you get punched. And I realized, even despite having done this for, almost 2 decades by that point, what I didn't know. And I was just grateful. I was lucky because I walked into the job with, having been there for, 5 seasons before that with an entire support staff, and not just like traditional support staff, as you would think, like PAs, stuff like that. The former executive producer and showrunner of the show, Jonathan Groff, was still on the show helping out. He would help me out in post. We had an entire crew that knew who I was and was excited about me kind of leading them for a little bit. So the transition was made easy. So all the things I didn't know made it was easy to kind of knock a little off the learning curve, because everybody, I always look at it, we don't auteur these things. Maybe some people do. I certainly don't. It's such a team sport. And to have a team that was enthusiastic to get behind us and have Anthony and Tracy and Lawrence and such an incredible cast already, I keep saying, if you have Shaq and Kobe on your team, you're going to win a lot of games. And I was lucky enough to have incredibly talented people around me to make my transition into that job a lot easier.
And going into this final season, you had 7 seasons before it of story and character development. What were some of the most important things that you knew that you wanted to pay off before the show ended, and places that you wanted to make sure you checked off?
The nice thing about being kind of like a comedy is that we don't have any lingering questions. It's not a mystery like Twin Peaks where you're trying to solve. It's not Game of Thrones where you're trying to figure out who's going to end up on the Iron Throne. And so mostly what people watch the show for is to enjoy the time with that family, and we'd done 150 something episodes by that point, maybe a little more. So in the last 13, we just wanted to give them 13 more half hours where they could have fun, celebrate the joy that hopefully the show brought, be comedic. I know we get cited for doing kind of important issue-y kind of things, but maybe there's 2 or 3 of those a season. And, there's 20 episodes in which we enjoy, kind of seeing a family that enjoys being around each other. So that was the primary objective. Let's do 13 more half hours of fun where we can sit there and see this group before they just kind of shuffle off into syndication,
And one of the themes from the season was Bo and Dre kind of wanting a big change, in their lives at this point. And I felt like it, reflected a lot of people in this world since the pandemic. We've seen people reevaluating a lot. How did you come about deciding what those changes would be for them and why they would make those decisions?
It's interesting. I mean, obviously the pandemic, the kind of way we all went back and looked at where we were in life, the decisions we were making, using it as an opportunity to kind of relaunch and reevaluate, that played a role into it, but also kind of getting ready to do a finale and a final season. We, the other writers, myself, Laura Guten Peterson, who was the EP on the show on my right hand, we talked a lot about what other shows have done. And we knew we wanted to kind of to go into this last season. It was also kind of we were more serialized than we usually are. We're very episodic, in nature. And so we knew to get to a satisfying ending, it had to kind of have more of a kind of we had to aim for an ending in a way that we traditionally don't do. So we had to take a look at it, see what other shows have done. And to get to the ending we were going for, we just kind of looked back and said, okay, where did we start? Cheers kind of went full circle with its ending. We wanted to go full circle. And for us, looking at Anthony's character and the way that Kenya set up the show as a family that is lives outwardly in their lives as a Black family. They don't happen to just be Black. They're proud of it. They live all the experience. They talk about it. And a lot of the issues arise from them being kind of outliers in their community. So we knew we wanted to go to a point where we started to question like some of the premises, and the premises of the pilot where we live in this neighborhood because we have to so our kids can go to school, or we have to because these are the only places where you can like have a house that's nice, or we have to because of this. And I think, you know, one of the things we all started to do during the pandemic was question assumptions. And so what we did was went back and questioned some of the assumptions from the pilot so that our character could end in a place where he'd grown and that we couldn't go back, you know, in a way, so that they've grown to a place that felt like a terminal point.
And one of the unique things about you know, family comedies, especially, is you get this young cast that you're watching grow up on screen. You know, their characters are growing up. They as actors are growing up. What was it like developing those? You know, those characters, like who they were as characters, and also leaning into what the actors' strengths were becoming?
I mean, honestly, it's a gift and it's a lot of luck because, you know, in season one, you cast, you know, Miles and Marseille, and they're cute, and you know, and just obviously the physics of television production, you can't use them a lot. There are child labor laws, you know, there are things you have to use them sparingly, and they can come in, deliver punchlines. They're cute. People love seeing cute kids on TV. We don't know if they're going to grow up to be, you know, funny comedic actors or be able to turn emotional scenes. And a lot of shows that doesn't happen. And we got incredibly fortunate that we did. They developed into such good actors. We didn't have to hide from them. In fact, in season 6, we were able to run to them and embrace them as like, you know, preteens, teenagers getting into junior high, and tell stories that we couldn't tell with Yara and Marcus because they were a little older when the show started and into high school. So look, a lot of this comes down to just luck, and we were very fortunate to be able to have two really good, strong, good kids too as actors who were willing to allow us to flex our wings and stretch our wings a little bit as writers, to sit there and say like, oh, hey, we can tell this kind of storyline. We can see what happens when they get in trouble. They don't just have to come in and be one-line characters. And so they, with their talents, they gave us the opportunity to kind of write them fuller and deeper. So that was, I mean, again, that's again like the gift of getting and running into the show and having such a talented support staff around me, and then having the gift of these talented actors. I mean, like I was set up to succeed in a way that like I'm incredibly grateful for, you know.
And you mentioned, you know, the show, you know, occasionally having these you know, more deeper thematic episodes, you know, within the context of you know, what's happening in the world. And this one, you had that really emotional near the end, "If a Black Man Cries in the Woods" episode. Was that one you always knew that you wanted to kind of have that moment for those three Johnson men?
In a way, yeah. I mean, Lawrence actually came to us in season during, so it was 2020. We were definitely in the pandemic. I was working from home. It was before we started shooting. And he had an idea. He just wanted to talk about, like, you know, there's an armor a lot of like Black people, particularly men, wear in the world to protect themselves from, you know, from the world itself. And finding a space to have a conversation about vulnerability. And the show is set up kind of with this spine of the Lawrence, Anthony, Marcus, you know, that kind of generational setup that, you know, and we, you know, we saw a lot. We derived a lot of comedy from, you know, Anthony being hard on Marcus's character. And for us, we knew that we wanted to resolve that. And Lawrence gave us the idea. That was again in season 7 before we even knew there was a season 8. You know, and we had to hold off on it because it felt like an ending point. It felt like we needed to keep the dynamic going for all the reasons that it had worked on the show, and it needed to kind of be our emotional closure in a way for Anthony to really grow as a character. You know, at the beginning, he's sitting there and saying like, "My kids are Black-ish," you know, and like he's trying to make them something that they aren't. And we addressed that for 170 episodes, and we got to an end where he had to just kind of not just accept who he was, who his son was, but also know that like all the work he had done to protect his son had worked. And now they crossed a point in their relationship where it wasn't about protecting him. He's raised him into a man. It should be about being that port in a storm, allowing himself to be vulnerable so that they could connect on another level. And then seeing obviously Lawrence's character as somebody who had never gotten to that place with his own son, Anthony, and that they were all the three of them on that trip allowed to kind of like find a space where they could just be honest and vulnerable with each other. That was our goal. And Rob Chavis wrote a great script. Ayanna Morris-Jackson directed it incredibly well. And I think, as you know, again, if I ever get a chance to work with actors as talented as them again, I'll just be incredibly grateful, which is the theme of the whole thing, just gratitude. But like literally it's we can do that because they're so good, and so it was an episode we were incredibly proud of. And it felt like, a lot of shows that like you really get that the end comes before the goodbye in a lot of ways. And so for us, that was really our end. And then the next episode, the finale, was our goodbye.
Well, congratulations on the show, on 8 years of great work, and many, many more in syndication, as you mentioned. And thank you so much for joining us.
It's been a pleasure, Daniel. Thank you, man.
Nikki Toscano, you're the showrunner for the limited series The Offer, which tells the story of the drama behind the scenes during the making of The Godfather from the point of view of producer Albert Ruddy. Now, Ruddy was the man calling a lot of the shots, trying to facilitate everyone's work on the film. So in a way, you're kind of a showrunner telling the story of a showrunner. Did it feel meta for you at all as you were making it, or do you feel like your role and Albert Ruddy's role were very different, like obviously the mob notwithstanding?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was incredibly meta for everyone on set. I mean, we're shooting on the Paramount lot. We're shooting on stages where The Godfather shot. I think that there was an awareness for everyone, myself included, about the responsibility of what that was going to be like. And I think that there were a lot of jokes, let's say, about the making of, the arguments that we were having about creative integrity versus budget, that Ruddy was enduring in his time as the producer of The Godfather were the same things that we were going through. So I think that it was incredibly sort of eye-opening to feel the sort of the meta-ness of it all at all times.
And what were some of the challenges that Ruddy faced in the series that you could especially relate to, as a showrunner? I think that at its core, ultimately fighting for your vision. There's a lot of people that have a lot of different opinions and that are dubious about certain stages of production, whether it be from crafting the scripts to casting choice to production concerns. I think that at the end of the day, one of the underlying themes of The Offer is that it is worth that fight. What would The Godfather have been if it weren't for Al Pacino or Marlon Brando or Robert Evans or Francis Ford Coppola or Mario Puzo? And I think that as we navigated the process, I think that the challenges of maintaining that creative need to have your vision land on the screen is something that we can all relate to. And with a project like this, you're telling the story of a lot of very recognizable people, famous names, also people behind the scenes who aren't as recognized. What's that casting process like? Is it especially challenging because you're looking for someone who could capture, the essence of a person, can maybe resemble them a little, or, what are all the thoughts that go into that?
I mean, there were a lot of early conversations just about what we were trying to do here. And I think that you said it best, and which was that we were never looking for anybody that was a direct imitation of that character. It was about finding someone that captured the essence and the soul of that person. You know, these people, particularly people like Al Pacino and Marlon Brando and Francis Ford Coppola, who are such iconic humans in their own right, and trying to find a way to essentially capture the soul of what was guiding them, what was navigating them. And, you know, I think that, you know, from early on, we, you know, a lot of people, because it's The Godfather, right, which is a blessing and a curse in the same thing. Everybody was very excited to be a part of this project. And so actors that maybe normally wouldn't put themselves on tape were putting themselves on tape. And we were able to see which people were doing just more of the imitation, particularly in the instance of, like, let's say Al Pacino and Marlon Brando, and which people were just capturing like what it must have felt for, you know, Pacino, for Marlon Brando, for Francis Ford Coppola, for Mario Puzo, for Al Ruddy, at that time, you know.
And you have this property, of course, as you mentioned, the blessing and the curse. Like, The Godfather is such an iconic film, and to be telling a story about The Godfather, did that add extra sort of pressure to kind of not only, you know, getting the details right, but also making it really dramatically satisfying?
Yeah, I mean, it's the same thing. I mean, it's the thing that pulls you in and the thing that scares you at the same time. It's incredible. It's an incredible responsibility, you know, to be dealing with one of the best, arguably one of the best films of all time. And I think that all of us felt the weight of that responsibility, but also we're so excited to be telling this story from this unique perspective. You know, there's been a lot of things that have been put out, you know, whether it be from Robert Evans' point of view, or Peter Bart's point of view, Francis Ford Coppola's point of view. And I think that capturing the Al Ruddy side of this, which was something that, you know, I didn't have a great awareness of, and this unique story of this man who was not only battling the studio system, but the real life mafia as well. And when there's inherent life and death stakes attached to the obstacles that your character is navigating, it's a really unique way to tell a story. And I feel like it's something that anyone can relate to.
And having Al Ruddy on board also as an executive producer, what was it like working with him on his own life story?
You know, it was fun as hell. You know, Al Ruddy is a really, really unique man with a ton of swagger and a ton of experience and a ton of stories. And, you know, Michael Tolkien sat down with him very early on and interviewed him. And we've got, you know, probably about 140 pages of single spaced transcripts about various obstacles he encountered in the making of the film, the personal things that he was going through, you know, at that time. And he was a wonderful resource. He was always open. He was watching cuts. He was telling us when things, you know, didn't feel genuine or authentic. And he's just a hoot to have around, and a great character to be basing a series on because he's so unique.
One of the interesting things I noticed is that, like, you have worked with Al Pacino before. You were the producer on Hunters a couple of years ago, and now you're making a series where you're actually portraying Al Pacino earlier in his life. What's that like? I mean, that must have contributed to the extra meta sense that you were having.
Absolutely. And we had heard on Hunters, Al Pacino is a wonderful man and an amazing storyteller. So I had heard some of these stories prior to signing up to do the offer. And we cast Anthony Ippolito, who gave just a wonderful, wonderful performance. And I remember being on set that day, and I was rewriting some kind of scene and not really paying attention, but I had my headphones on, and they were starting to rehearse the scene, and I heard his voice, and it was chilling and eerie because I had spent so much time with the man on Hunters. And and I felt, I guess, gratified that, that we cast someone that was so, eerily capturing, the essence of who Pacino was, because he's just truly, truly extraordinary. It was a wonderful experience, working with him on Hunters, and then being able to try, attempt in our best way to capture him in The Offer.
And one of the themes in the series is sort of this clash between the commerce side of Hollywood and the artistic side. And it feels at certain times like with superhero movies and like all this sort of stuff, like it feels like the commerce has won out in a lot of ways. Like, do you feel like the Barry Lapidus's are more in control of Hollywood and there aren't as many Robert Evanses?
Well, I mean, I think that there's certainly a parallel between what was happening in the early 70s, to today, with, big business having a stake in movie making and TV making, across the board. And I think that at the end of the day, the thing that everyone should be left with is that it is worth it to fight for the Godfathers of the world, the Marathon Mans, the Chinatowns, the extraordinary filmmakers coming to the mat and delivering their vision. And I think that at the end of the day, the moral of the story is, is trust the creative and allow for them to put forth their vision so that we as a collective world are not missing out on something greater.
Well, congratulations on The Offer, and your work on the series on Paramount Plus, where people can also watch The Godfather. So it's like a great 1-2 punch. And thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Rob Siegel, you're the showrunner for Pam and Tommy, which tells the story of the infamous sex tape that was stolen from Pamela Anderson and Tommy Lee and released without their consent. Now, I read an interview where you said that this story was, it screams limited series. And I'm wondering, what made you feel like the long form treatment was so right for this?
As opposed to a movie? One, it was really hard to get it made as a movie. And limited series are just kind of where these types of stories seem to be migrating to. And it's just such a world, there's just so much more. I think when I told people about this, they said, how are you gonna do 8 hours about this tape? And it's just really, it's about the birth of the internet. It deals with issues of privacy and consent. You could make a case that our modern world, I don't want to say this was the birth of our modern era, but if you accept the premise that, say, Kim Kardashian and Jeff Bezos are the two defining figures of our moment, which you could make a case, that all kind of can be traced back to this tape, so it was a lens through which you can tell just a much, much bigger story. And I don't know that a 2-hour movie would have kind of given you the canvas that I thought it deserved.
And it's based on a Rolling Stone article. So in expanding it to 8 episodes, what was, what extra research and preparation and thought went into it?
Well, we read everything we could. There's Tommy Lee's autobiography, Tommyland. There's the Motley Crue biography, The Dirt. We read watched every interview we could possibly with all of our main characters. We had access to some of the source material for the article. The writer of the article for Rolling Stone gave us access to all of her interviews. We had interviews with Rand, court transcripts. We did as deep a dive as we could.
And we've been seeing a lot of what happened in the 90s being kind of reevaluated, especially in seeing how much misogyny played a part in how we looked at people like Marcia Clark and Tanya Harding and Tammy Faye Baker, and of course now Pamela Anderson. Did you follow the story as it was unfolding at the time, and how's your kind of thoughts about it evolved over the course of now making the series?
It has evolved in that I now know the story. I didn't know it at all. If you had asked me, 2 days before I signed on to this project, I would have, I don't know. I would have probably assumed, like most people, that they were in on the theft. Which of course they weren't, and that's a big part of our show, is that we are very clear that this was a violation and a crime. So no, I didn't know that. I just kind of knew what most people did, which is, now looking back, all the tapes, kind of the high profile sex tapes that followed this, Kim Kardashian and Paris Hilton, could be seen as kind of career moves. And this definitively was not a career move. This was a crime.
And this series being about an invasion of privacy, like what's that fine line you're walking as a creator to tell this story, but also not be exploitative or kind of
well, we had those conversations constantly, every day, all the time, kind of, and that was something that the producers and the actors, we all kind of collectively, we never wanted to, we were always on their side, certainly Pam's side. So, we didn't know if she would see the show or not. And I think she hasn't watched the show, but, we always came at it from a place of admiration and kind of wanting to do right by her, which hopefully we did. I don't know if Pam, I don't know if she'll ever see the show, but the show definitely, has a lot of love for her. And she's ultimately the heroine of the show. So, hopefully she does feel like, the show did do right by her.
And then, of course, casting those two title roles, Sebastian Stan and Lily James, even with, the makeup and all of that to, transform them, their performances are also very much helping them disappear into these roles. Like, what was it like casting them, and what did you see from their performances that made you think these are absolutely right?
Starting with Sebastian, he's kind of just a straight up chameleon. If you've ever, no two Sebastian performances are the same. He's just incredibly good at disappearing into roles. And we also, on top of that, just thought he would be able to resemble, there's enough of a resemblance there. With Lily, I remember when we first cast her, there was, kind of surprise in the Twitterverse. It seemed like an obvious choice to me, because it's so much about Pam. There's so many layers. Pam presents a certain face to the world, and we underestimate her. And I feel like I was almost happy about the negative reaction, because I thought, oh, okay, they're doing the same thing to Lily that we see with Pam, which is people underestimate her. They think, oh, she's the bubbly princess from Mamma Mia, or Cinderella, but she actually has this she's incredibly tough and incredibly shrewd. And conversely, Pam has a real sweetness about her, I think the obvious move would have been to cast, Megan Fox, or just sort of a badass bombshell. And I thought, just to bring out the sweetness and the sort of the layers, the surprising layers of Pam, Lily was just felt right. A lot of it's just a gut feeling, and she just really, really wanted it. You could just feel when we talked to her and met with her about it, that she was, we knew this was going to be a really demanding, that there would be, we didn't know exactly how long, but 4 to 5 hours in the makeup chair. It was an exhausting, really exhausting. She worked while we were all asleep, she was in the makeup trailer, you know? And I don't think you could do that for, 4 months straight without a break unless you really, really want it. And she certainly did.
And you have women directors on most of these the episodes of this series. Was that something that was important to you, to have that sort of female gaze in this story that's very much about?
Definitely. We had a female. 3 of our 4 directors were female, and I will name them because they're all fantastic. There was Lake Bell, Hannah Fidel, and Gwyneth Horder Payton. Our DP was also was a woman who shot all the episodes, named Paula Huidobro. I've known her for years. Huidobro. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. She also just shot Coda, so shout out to her for that. Definitely. I mean the female. I don't know. I just, having the camera trained on Lily, we just felt like, the female gaze aspect, and just, I think for Lily's comfort, we felt like, and just for just all the different things that you get, that perspective, we felt, it's important to have a lot of women in key roles.
And I have to ask about that prosthetic, the talking penis.
Which one are you?
The talking penis prosthetic voiced by Jason Mantzoukas. Where did that idea come from, and what did Hulu think when that was originally pitched?
By the way, we are planning a really aggressive, vigorous awards campaign. There's apparently a category for voice work in. I forget the exact, some voice category that he
best character voiceover, I would assume, would be his character.
Yes,
category.
There will be billboards. Hopefully. Sorry, what was the question?
No, I'm just wondering where the idea came from, and like
the idea. I wish I could claim credit. That was an adaptation of Tommyland. In Tommy's autobiography, his penis is sort of a character. He has these dialogues back and forth, and I would like to think Tommy probably does that. I don't know. It was a little bit of a. People were expecting him to be a recurring character in the show. It was kind of just a one-off. I thought one and done was the way to go with that. And we had an animation. Sebastian, bless his heart, had the equivalent of a Yoda, an animatronic Yoda puppet on his groin for a full day. Sadly, we're not in the era of DVD outtakes extras anymore. That certainly, there's some good stuff there somewhere in the vaults. But that was. I can't take credit. That was all Tommy.
I'm looking forward to that spin-off, by the way. That will be
the Mantzoukas.
That
I figure he's probably played, I don't know, on Big Mouth. Is he a penis on Big Mouth?
I'm not sure. It seems like that would certainly fit there.
It felt a bit like typecasting, but he did great.
Congratulations on the show and your work and everyone's work on it. And it's been a pleasure talking with you about it.
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
Nida Manzoor, you wrote, directed, and produced We Are Lady Parts, about a group of Muslim women who form a punk band. Now, I know you had a very personal connection to this story when you created it. What was that initial germ of an idea that eventually, blossomed into the show?
Yeah, it sort of in part was born out of a frustration. Working as a new writer, I had been called in from a couple of production companies to write some like heavy hitting dramas about very dark stories about Muslim women, and I was being asked to write these stories, and I was kind of confused on one level because all my specs are comedy scripts, and I love comedy, so I was sort of feeling a frustration that there was really this one-dimensional representation of Muslim women, and so I was being asked to look at this aspect of my identity as a drama. So I kind of went away and just thought about, like, if I could make my dream show and I had to talk about this aspect of being a Muslim woman. What would it be? And that's really when I kind of came up with We Are Lady Parts. You know, it would be a comedy. It would have surreal moments. It would have lots of punk music that I would write with my siblings. You know, I just really kind of created this idea and this pitch, basically, that encapsulated the world I wanted to create, the characters I wanted to show, the tone, the everything. And I just took that around to different production companies and tried to see who would buy it. So yeah, in part born out of frustration, and then which kind of made me lean into the things that I love.
And what was it about punk that made that sort of the genre of choice to kind of center these characters and the story around?
Oh, I don't know. You know, it's just punk is probably the thing that I was like loving growing up as a teenager. And it was certainly something that was being played at home. And it's again, not usually the kind of thing you would expect Muslim women to be passionate about, but actually so many of my friends, we were all into it, and you kind of felt like the odd outsider being into the music, but really there's so many people who kind of love that music from all kinds of backgrounds. And, you know, it allowed me to, you know, show the complexity of identity. You know, when you kind of put punk and Muslim and women together, it just allows you to go into nuances and show different kinds of ways of being. And again, because, you know, punk is that anarchic spirit, that joyful silliness. And again, it's not something you associate, or we have been shown on TV as that, you know, Muslim women have pretty much been shown as serious, long-suffering, one-dimensional wives of terrorists. So, you know, to be able to use punk as a kind of conduit to explore the silliness of these women, their kind of nuances, the anger, the rage, the joy, was just like, it kind of felt like the perfect vehicle. And, you know, I got to write, you know, music was my first passion. I wanted to be a singer-songwriter, but more in the ilk of like, I was obsessed with Paul Simon. So I was more kind of, you know, singer-songwritery, brown girl Bob Dylan was my dream. My sister was much more into the punk stuff. So just, you know, allowing myself to bring all this music into it was just super cool.
And as you mentioned, you know, Muslim women being underrepresented, except in these very kind of stereotypical roles, does that increase the pressure placed on like you and your show to sort of represent what is an incredibly broad and diverse community just in one show?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was like frequently freaking out. You know, it's just that pressure of, am I gonna fail at representation if I mess this up? Or, you know, and it was really interesting. It was kind of a storyline I could put back into the show. Just the kind of the navigating the stresses of representation I could give to my characters, because they're all artists. And I could also, because I have a whole load of them, I could give them different positions, some more conservative, others more bolshy, others more confrontational, and just really have that conversation in the show, which I think, you know, when I talk to other writers coming through, like the one thing that I always get asked is like, how do you overcome the fear of messing up? Because there's so few voices of ours on screen, you know, the shit will come down on you if you do. Like, you will be called out. So it's this fear that is so debilitating sometimes for new writers when they're trying to represent communities that don't get put on screen. So, you know, it was definitely something I went through, but I just really hope that the show encourages new writers, other stories, and, you know, the more diversity there is, the less fear there is, and the bolder the work is. So that's what I hope. I don't think I answered your question. I just went on a rant. Sorry.
No, you absolutely did. And you know, having the characters that you do represent are also different and specific. Do you feel like you like share more in common with any one of them personally? Like any one of them is like closer to who you are, basically, as an individual?
Yeah, I suppose like Amina, the lead, I could pour all my anxiety in, but then you could put a bit of the rage into a character like Syra. Syra's quite inspired by my older sister, who's really angry as a teenager. And yeah, it was just kind of drawn from a lot of the artists who I was seeing in London, like, you know, poets, musicians, playwrights who are kind of expressing their identities in like a really full new way, you know, really combating this sort of false dichotomy of like us and them. Instead, it's sort of like, exploring the complexity and the contradictions and the silliness. And I was kind of inspired by the people around me creating art. And that really went into the work, as well as my own, personal, issues, I suppose.
And you mentioned writing the original songs, with your siblings. Did the ideas for the songs come out of the show, or did the songs come first and the show kind of, the storylines kind of wrapped around them?
It was a kind of mixed bag. Like sometimes I just like Bashir with the good beard came, I think, without any. Yeah, I didn't know where it would come in the episode, but I found a perfect place for it. So it was, some of them were already there. I was actually like trying to brainstorm funny song titles and then took that from there. So it was sort of like some of them came from the show, others, it was just from like messing around with my siblings. I mean, that was what was so crazy about making this show. It was just like weeks in a studio with my brothers, my sister, just being like, cool, let's hanging out and making music. It was crazy. But it was so joyful and fun, and it just felt like, sometimes it was like, I'm so lucky I got to make the show, because I was like, oh, this is the thing I wanted to do. I got to make it with all the people I love, and use their creativity and put it in the show and make it awesome. So it was so cool.
And you've written before and directed before, but is this the first time like you wrote, directed, produced, like all of that for a single series? And what was that like?
Yeah, it was. So I've like directed episodic stuff in the UK. I did a bunch of new comedies just as a director. I did some Doctor Who, which is sci-fi show in the UK. And then as a writer, I'd written like on a couple kids TV shows. So I'd like had those two things going, but I was sort of writing my own original stuff on the side. Which was kind of cool, because when Lady Parts happened, I had sort of credits, writing credits, directing credits, and actually a load of short films as well that I was kind of exploring the kind of tone and style I wanted to do. But I think what really allowed me, or gave me confidence to kind of take on the writing and the directing was, the UK broadcaster Channel 4 commissioned a pilot. So I had to write and direct like a short version of what the show would be. And I could hire like all the HODs, because it was sort of low stakes at that point. It's like, it's just a comedy pilot. They'd chuck it online and see if anyone likes it. So I could basically bring on the dream team, and no one like questioned me. I could cast who I wanted. So I had such autonomy in bringing the team together. And so when the pilot was well received and Peacock came on board, I felt like I had confidence in myself, and people had confidence in me. And that really allowed me to kind of take on those roles.
And the show has been well received, as you mentioned. It was nominated at the Gotham Awards, the Independent Spirit Awards, and of course, 6 BAFTA nominations and 3 wins, including 1 for yourself. What was that moment like, hearing your name be called and being recognized for this show?
Oh, no, thank you for shouting out all the accolades. The BAFTA was pretty cool. I mean, the BAFTA was cool because Olivia Colman was giving it to me. And so I just had like an Olivia Colman freak out. And it was cool as well, being recognized in the UK, from the sort of British comedy peeps are quite, it can be quite small here, but it's just nice to be accepted, because, I'm so inspired by the stuff, that the British comedians who've sort of been working before me, but also like to be able to go to LA and go to Indie Spirit Awards was super fun as well. It's like a whole different world, a whole different vibe. But it's so nice that the show has been embraced in the US as well, and in a way that when we were pitching it, when we were developing it, there was always this question of like, will it translate? Will American audiences get the specifics? And of course, because audiences are more advanced than we ever give them credit for, and also because I was pretty much raised on Malcolm in the Middle. I don't think my storytelling style is going to be super challenging for anyone, but it was just so interesting that there were those conversations being had, and so it's been so cool to see the show go down well over there as well.
Congratulations on the show and the recognition it's gotten so far. Knock on wood to continue. And thank you so much for chatting with me about it.
Thanks so much, Daniel. It's my pleasure.
I'm Gold Derby editor Daniel Montgomery, here with TV showrunners Courtney Lilly from Blackish, Nikki Toscano from The Offer, Rob Siegel from Pam and Tommy, and Nida Manzoor from We Are Lady Parts. Now, with TV expanding so much over the last 10 years, there are so many different showrunners and so many different perspectives and experiences of the job. Do you think of showrunning as sort of being this artistic auteur behind the show, or more managerial, like you're sort of facilitating everyone else's good work, or maybe some combination of the two? Start with Nida.
Oh God. This has been so interesting for me to hear from the other showrunners, because I never thought of it as a show running role, mainly because I'm still kind of new to it all. I thought I was like, I'm writing it and then I'm directing it, and then I'm kind of like involved in all the different layers of it. And I suppose that is show running. But what always impresses me, and what is something I'm trying to learn for season 2, is bringing other people in and championing them and overseeing it in that way, which is also just hearing from the others on the panel. It feels like a whole different skill set, which is one I'm terrified of, but I'm also very excited to learn, because I don't know, in the UK maybe the culture is different. There's more of this auteur-y, you write it all, you direct it all, the series are shorter, all that. But I just think there's something really exciting about bringing other people in and just overseeing the tone and doing that. So it's something I don't think I'm really doing on series 1, because I was just doing all the jobs. But like in series 2, I want to take on more of that position and bring other people in as well.
Nikki, how about you?
I think that, to your question, I think it's a combination of both. I think that you're a different person in the writer's room than you are when you're on set and when you're running a production. And I feel like they're two separate muscles, and it's kind of fun to go between those two muscles. Some of the best experience that I have had for teaching me how to be a showrunner is not only watching great showrunners, but also working in bars and restaurants and having to manage people. Because it's really just about that at the end of the day. Like, how do you take this extraordinary production and all of these people who are so good and give them the space to create and to do their jobs in a way that makes them feel supported, that brings out the best in them as you're going forward. So I really think it's sort of, it's two muscles. And for me, it's really fun going, balancing and trying to go between the two.
Rob?
For me, showrunning is mostly about creating a set where everybody's happy and relaxed, versus a set where people are afraid and nervous. That to me, I've walked on, a number of sets, and I can almost tell within 10 minutes of being on set whether the person at the top was a nice person or an asshole. It's incredible. I didn't realize how much power, how much one person's personality influenced like an entire ecosystem. So for me, it's just, and I think people do, and I also don't buy into the myth of like people do their best work when they're feeling scared or under pressure or anything like that. To me, it's number one thing is like, make it a happy, it sounds corny, but like really make it a happy place. And people are laughing and smiling, and they know that if they can we curse on this?
Sure.
If they fuck up, they're not like, oh my God, they're going to be there. Everything's okay, because we know everyone's trying and everyone's really talented.
How about you, Courtney?
There's a couple of different things. I agree with everything everybody said. I mean, I think probably the answer to your questions, I feel it's more artisanal than artistic. I also worked mostly in network shows, and so I'm also doing it slightly different because we're in production while we're writing and we're shooting, and so like everything's happening at once. But to what Robert was just saying, my job, I feel, as a showrunner is to be accountable. It's accountability. You're accountable for the attitude on set. You're accountable to your budgets, to your writer's room, to people's careers. And if you can kind of set up a place where whoever you're dealing with, that the buck kind of stops there, and it's an incredibly heavy responsibility, especially when you're producing and shooting during a pandemic like we all have been doing. I think then it's it's a leadership position. I think people can then move forward in what it is. And so every time I sit there and I'm just like, all right, well, this is what I got to step and do. This is got to step up and do this. And so, and it starts with the script too. Even in the scripts, it's like, well, if the script doesn't make sense, it's kind of on me to be able to make sure it makes sense. And it's too much of a burden to do a show and not trust other people. So, and I think to what everybody's saying, to what Robert's saying too, it's like, it's to get the best out of people, you give them, opportunity themselves to feel like they're part of the creative process, to know if it's, a pink shirt and you wanted a green shirt, that the show's still going to go on and it's not a huge deal. And you can creatively come up with new solutions, because you want everybody to feel empowered and do as well, and do the job as much as possible. So and if you have bad apples, it's not worth the culture, all of it going down. Be accountable and make sure you adjust the situation so you don't have those bad apples, because you want to set a culture. That's the important thing. This is where people spend their days. It's a workplace. It's great that we be able to make television for people that they can be excited about and and be invested in. But for all of us particularly, it's where we spend our days. So they need to be pleasant places.
Yeah, and it's kind of encouraging to hear all of you talk about that, and how this idea of the tortured artist and all that kind of tension, breeding genius is kind of going out of style, thankfully. Do you feel like things are changing across the board, or how much more progress is there to be made, do you think, Courtney?
To be very frank, I think every show is its own version of a cult. So basically it's hey, maybe it's working here, but I step out of here, you go to another show, who knows what's going on? It could be just crazy. I mean, we're all so invested in making it work. We don't know we know what we want. We know we want to be, you want people to be able to work with dignity, but sometimes you don't even know. I've worked on shows where I was just afterward, I was like, that was crazy. What we all endured and how we all just normalized it. And so I would hope so. I know we're having more discussions like this within our unions, within our peer groups, all that other kind of stuff. But I could go to dinner with somebody a week from now and hear a story that'll just make me go, holy cow, that's insane. So you're hoping so. I think all these conversations are with the intention to make these workspaces better for everybody. Because again, and this is just my personal opinion, I've worked with incredibly talented people. And but I have not worked with a genius yet. So God bless us all. It's such a team effort. Everybody works so hard, and to see what gets up on the screen takes the work of people who aren't even in the credits a lot of time in your show. So I think that kind of idea that it's a single individual and their kind of vision that brings this thing, and it's the entire weight of the world is resting on their shoulders and all that other kind of stuff. It's just too much for me. I don't get it. It's not my thing.
Rob?
What's the question?
Do you feel like the culture around running a show and being more positive and making it a welcome environment do you feel like that's changing across the board?
I hope so. I think so. I think there's less tolerance for bad behavior, but then you still hear these stories. So I might just be completely naive. I don't know. I can only, like Courtney said, you can only speak to what's, been your experience. And I know, I don't tolerate that, but you still hear stories. I don't know. Is the world getting better? Maybe.
Oh,
I'd like to hand it over to someone else.
Nikki, how about you? What do you think?
I gotta say that I'm with Robert and Courtney on this. I know what I'm responsible for, and the kind of set and the kind of writer's room and across the board that I want to create, and a warm, empowering, fun experience for everybody. you know, I used to hear early on in my career that the make of a great showrunner is to make other great showrunners. And I think that it's really, really critical and important to be doing that. And you only do that by empowering and making people feel like they have the freedom to swing and fail. Because I'm sure everybody on this panel, you know, knows that some of the best ideas are born from the shittiest pitches. And I think that if people aren't empowered to swing, you can't, you know, achieve this sort of level of greatness. As far as speaking for other people, yeah, I mean, you still hear stories. You still hear, you know, crazy shit show stories. Sorry.
No, feel free. Nida?
Yeah, I think I'm just echoing what everyone else has said. You know, wanting to create an environment where your collaborators can do their best work and have ownership of what they're doing. And you know, we spend so much of our time on set, in the writer's room, writing, that there needs to be joy, because there's so much else of our personal lives, of our relationship sacrifice, you know, that, so it's almost like it needs to be a good experience. You know, I'm just coming through in the time I've been working in the industry. You know, one of my first jobs was on a set where it was a sort of reign of terror from the kind of head creator, and it did trickle down, and there's the toxicity that went down, and like, you know, everyone was feeling ill. It was just, you know, I think that experience really showed me what not to do. And I mean, I'm, you know, I'm hopeful. I feel like there's a change in the culture, like you're saying, there's less tolerance. I just don't know how he would be making stuff anymore, just from, you know, people are more vocal when they aren't being treated well. So I'm hoping that there's lasting change, but like everyone else has said, you know, the stories still abound. So yeah.
And Nikki, you mentioned that you know, the mark of a good showrunner is making other great showrunners. I wonder what you know, with all this in mind, what kind of advice would you give to a new showrunner or an up and coming showrunner about, you know, how to create, you know, the right set to get what you need and to make sure everyone else is getting what they need?
You know, I mean, I think first and foremost, to lead with respect and kindness. Everybody is in your circle because they bring a certain talent to the table. I think that it's important to recognize that talent and let them know when they're exceeding your expectations. I think, like I said before, like having the ability to swing and fail. We're not all perfect. It's just, you know, from the actors to the cinematographers to the showrunner, you know, there's going to be times where we fail, and just, you know, offering a little grace when that happens, and that we're all trying to you know, bringing people in, that we're all trying to achieve a wonderful show. And I think that, you know, I think it begins and ends there, and that's what I got.
Rob?
I'm always amazed how low the bar is for being lauded as the nicest person, because like if you just practice basic minimum civility, people will be like, oh my God, he is so nice. Like if you don't cut the lunch line, or if there's one seat left on the van and you know, two people are ahead of you and you don't leapfrog them, people look at you like, oh my God, what a first class individual that is. It's just, which is why I'm like, how do people blow this? Like, it's just, the expectations are so low for being decent. You know, and then people are watching you, you know, you're not really, you don't realize what an example you're setting, you know, at all times. Just, you know, wear your mask, be polite, know people's names. You know, I spend most of the first week trying to learn names, you know, learning the grips names. And it just makes such a difference if you can walk past somebody and say like, hey, what's up, Rocco? How you doing? It's that alone like sets a tone that you're not above everyone else. And the people can talk to you, make sure people know that they can talk to you or call you. You know, when they send out the crew list, they're always like, do you want to put your phone number on it? Yeah, because I want people to be able to reach me if they have a question. Like shit like that counts as as extraordinary, extraordinary human behavior when it's just, to me, normal.
Courtney?
I mean, everything Nikki and Robert said is 100% true. Like, and I think one of the things I've been lucky to do, and some of it's because we've been on the air for so long. And when I started to run the show, I knew a lot of people and there was opportunity to grow. Like, one of the nice things we've seen with Zoom is I have my writers in, no matter what level, I'm able to spend time with them, make sure they see the post process. They're able to be on stage and like really, and it's one of the things that, I know we've talked a lot about it as writers in our guild, but like it's with the shorter order shows and the writers' rooms being in one space, shows being in other, like it's been hard for a lot of younger writers to learn how to produce and make a television show. And one of the things I say about this job being artisanal and that there's like a real apprenticeship. I got lucky because I had bosses who I was able to learn from and watch under, and so like taking an opportunity to like, and being fair in it, not just somebody who reminds you of yourself or somebody you always agree with, but like knowing that people have an opportunity to explore their other creative options, and see what they could. We have a young woman who was like our set PA a few years ago who wanted to be a writer, and she ended up in the last 2 seasons being in our writers' room. Being open to discussions with people about where they ultimately would like to like be creatively. And again, it was easy on our show because we were on for a long period of time. We knew we were going to be on for a long period of time, but like it just also helps create a climate where people know it's like, okay, I'm not just this thing, then I do this for you, and maybe my name or whatever the kind of thing is, but like that there are human beings with like dreams and ambitions and all these other kind of things themselves. And you never know, man. Like I've been so lucky to have people who've really just by that, like you've seen people just grow and exceed your expectations by giving them opportunities, so.
Nida?
Yeah. No, yeah, agreeing with everyone here. I was just thinking something you said, like this idea of the genius, the kind of auteur who mustn't be disturbed is so unhealthy and unhelpful to creating a good environment, a collaborative environment, because it just, it's like they're unapproachable, they're the ones, and they can kind of get away with anything because they're the genius. It's so unhealthy. And that's what's so exciting now when you're just like, it's just a bunch of really talented people just trying to work it out and trying to do something cool, and maybe you get it wrong and hopefully you can fix it in post, and it's all just a bit of a struggle together, and that kind of eases the pressure off. It sort of stops it being so hierarchical, and it makes like it just empowers everyone to take ownership, and it's just so inspiring hearing from the others just how for me it's just what is the exciting thing is bringing other writers through who can come through the show and sort of have their voices heard as well, which is something that is not something I've experienced. I've never been in a writer's room in that sense. And so it's a kind of an exciting new kind of frontier, I suppose, where I'm kind of always still struggling is more the, there's that managerial aspect. There's difficult decisions that need to be made that sometimes aren't going to go down well with everyone, talking about bad apples. It's how to confront that, how to deal with those situations, which is something, again, like new skills that I'm sort of finding as I kind of continue in my career. And just as a kind of separate thing, always leading with kindness, but then there's also kind of that other side of having to be firm and having to make the best decision for the show and for the other people.
Well, congratulations to all 4 of you about for your work this season, and thanks so much for talking with me. It's always a pleasure to talk to people who make such not only good work but such a wide range of different kinds of work. So thank you so much for being here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.